moving here, getting the last flight out from London was pretty stressful. And then as things were starting to get a little bit kind of normal, kind of getting used to the new normal, then there was a lot of racial tensions.
So Wallace, can you tell us about your journey moving to New York from London this year, in the midst of a global pandemic and a time where the US and NYC in particular have had BLM protests daily? What differences have you found?
It's obviously been a very hard process, just in general, without the racial side of things. Moving here, getting the last flight out from London was pretty stressful. Sorting out all my kind of personal admin stuff to actually kind of be here and integrate into normal society has been difficult. And obviously with work, you know, everyone in the recruitment industry, the tech industry has definitely felt a hit from COVID. And then as things were starting to get a little bit kind of normal, kind of getting used to the new normal, then there was a lot of racial tensions, not just in America, but globally. Everyone pretty much stood up and took attention to what happened to George Floyd. And not being from here, it definitely had a really big impact on how I felt on a day-to-day. There were definitely times where I felt displaced. It definitely brought up some old feelings growing up as a black person in school, college, the professional workplace, that really made me kind of dig deep into things that I've actually experienced, that I buried away for a very long time and thought that was just a normal thing, and that I just had to get on with it, as the people would say. So it's definitely been a soul-searching period for me, not only personally but professionally, as a black man in this modern day society, whether it's, again, personal or professional. And there's been some huge differences between kind of living in England and living in America as a black man. I would say that the biggest difference was that any kind of racial tension or anything racially charged is much more in your face here, which took me by surprise. Whereas in England, you definitely have that for sure, but being lucky enough to, you know, have a good upbringing by my parents in Cambridge, it was definitely not as in my face. However, because going through everything that has happened in America, especially New York, with all the protests and having certain conversations, it did make me do some soul searching and realize that actually I did experience quite a lot of racial situations that aren't okay. Even growing up in England, whether that's in school, college, university, and the professional workplace, which again made me want to have difficult conversations with people and also educate my friends and my colleagues on it so that, you know, we can all move forward.
Have you ever felt displaced based on your identity in the industry that you work in?
Yes, I have actually. So this is my first recruitment job at Salt, and I've never worked in the technology space before Salt. So the first thing joining the company was that, one, I have absolutely no idea what software engineering is. Two, I've never been a recruiter, and in my first few weeks kind of, you know, researching the industry, it was very obvious that the whole industry and the whole market is very much white, if I'm gonna kind of put it bluntly. So for me, someone that has limited experience, the first thing I'm thinking to myself, and it might sound crazy, but the first thing I'm thinking to myself is, if I reach out to someone, they're gonna be like, who's this black dude trying to talk to me? Does he know his stuff? And again, that might sound crazy speaking that out loud, but that's just one of the things that comes into my head as a black person, not feeling entirely confident in my industry, not feeling entirely confident in my new role and my new journey.
Has there ever been a moment for you when you feel like your identity was tested? How did you overcome or approach this?
It's a good question. I would say yes. It was tested in the fact that whenever the mention of diversity was ever kind of mentioned at work, any kind of initiatives, it always kind of felt like it was just a box ticker. And that definitely kind of tested my patience, because I want to be involved with something that is actually going to make lasting change and effect. And I had to really drill down on the motives as to why this particular client wanted to actually start this campaign. And if they wanted my involvement and they wanted my help, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just ticking a box for them so that they can put it on their HR report, but they actually do mean it, and they actually want to make lasting change for their particular industry and their particular workplace, which just to say that they did, and it was an amazing campaign, and we really made a big positive dent within that particular campaign and for their industry.
Do you feel like your identity has ever prohibited or impacted you in your career?
I would say no. I would say factually, no. Have I sometimes felt that it could? 100%, but I've been positively proven wrong when faced with the real life situation that it hasn't. But, just to kind of elaborate on that, there are times where you do feel like your identity, you feel like you'll be judged before you're actually being able to prove yourself.
What does diversity mean to you?
Diversity means going against the grain. It means progression, and it means outside the box, whatever that might be.
Do you feel like there are any racial prejudices within the technology industry?
Yes, I do. And I will be the first person to put my hand up and say that I have been racially prejudiced when doing my job, and I've actually educated myself, and I feel that the more that people talk about this is the more that people will actually be educated and not be prejudicial, if that's a word. Just because, a perfect example, I'm a recruiter looking for certain candidates, and I see a certain name, or I see they're from a certain country, and immediately you write them off, or you have a stereotypical view to their experience and how qualified they could be for a particular project you're working on. And that's something that I really try every day to drill out of my natural thinking, and I would recommend for any recruiter to do the same.
How would you advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging with colleagues or clients who don't prioritise its importance?
The first question I would ask is it a priority? And if they said yes, I would ask them how. And if it's a no, then I would ask them why it's not. And I think that I would start the conversation there, because once you start to talk about how it is or might not be a priority, then it will soon become a priority if that company want to move forward.
How do you feel SALT prioritises diversity in the workplace from your perspective?
I would say from my perspective, we have, at least for my particular office, we have a CEO that's extremely cultured, that has been around the world, and that has many perspectives, that doesn't only just relate to white people, but also relates to black people, it also relates to Asian people, also relates to any kind of denomination that people could be from. And the first feeling that I had joining SOL was that it was very open and very inclusive. However, I do think that it's not the perfect workplace. I feel that nowhere is a perfect workplace. But in terms of a foundation, we are encouraged to be involved, to have an influence. If we see something that we feel we want to change about the culture where diversity is concerned in the business, then we are given a license to speak up and to try and voice our concerns or our ideas on how we can progressively be a more diverse and inclusive workplace.